Can a comic cover a comedic bit like a musician? No, they can't.
Should have been 1, 2, 3, but recently something has happened to me. Everything always came easily, but today I woke up and felt nothing. Could I be finally finding out that there's absolutely nothing worth shouting about? Faced with the choice of just losing my voice, I'd rather shut up and say nothing. On the outside, we have to stick together. On the downside, you just get in the way. I see grey skies, and I feel a little better. I see grey skies ahead, and it's fine by me. Oh, all the way.
Every night, all over the world, new comedians try stuff out to work out their act. And the only way to get it right sometimes is to get it wrong first. Sorry. I don't know. Then they get off stage, go to the next gig, and do it all again. My name's Laura McMahon, and I wanted to investigate joke theft and parallel thinking. Because when you start out, you have to start at the bottom. And that's fine, because it takes a really long time to get good. But while you're working your stuff out, you're also watching other comics work their stuff out. So I wanted to figure out what's the line between taking inspiration and just outright taking. Because when you're on stage, you have complete freedom. But when you're off stage, you need to learn the rules of the game.
There's a code of ethics in comedy. Yeah, I mean,
the circuit is a circus.
You know, you don't need any qualifications. You don't need to be not insane.
comics are like cockroaches. You step on one and a million more appear, and they each have their own personality, but most of them are like either sycophants or psychopaths, and then there's maybe like 5 of them who actually want to do the art form.
Can I swear, by the way? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the rules are a bit chaotic, but the issue of taking people's work seems to be something that everyone has experience with.
Can't believe someone did that to me. But in my career, it has happened many, many times since.
So we know it hurts to be stolen from, but historically, publicly at least, not such a big deal was made out of it.
There have been many arguments in the past, especially with newer comics, and I'm talking even from my age group.
What's that age group?
51.
Yeah.
But that was the start of the kind of what they called alternative comedy, and just before that, you know, so those old guys now are like 60, you know, like the club comics and what have you. It was a given thing, oh, I'm doing that gag tonight, so don't you do that gag.
You know, 30, 40 years ago, that's what kind of was happening. There was just jokes in the ether and everybody shared them.
They were just jokes, like you almost had like a toolbox, like, oh, I needed 3/8.
So it was a passable, you know, they would just not so much nick gags and hear gags and just put them out.
There was no VCRs back then, there were no tapes, there was no honor amongst thieves back then.
I think with us lot, you know, we do write our own stuff, and it's hard, I think, especially with the one-liner guys, like, because they're thinking on the same level all the time. Could be forgiven, I suppose, because they can do a joke and they go, oh, I'm already doing that gag, because they're thinking the same. Yeah. I personally think that to steal one gag is, well, all right, okay, you take the gag. I think if you nick a routine or if you nick an idea, that's when I think it gets a little bit, well, you're taking the food off the table now.
Say if you write a bit on cameras, whatever the fuck the bit is on. A bit takes a long time to develop. They're ideas, you take them on stage, you have to figure out the right way to set it up, pulling your fucking hair out, you bang things back and forth and you shift them around, you try it this way, you try it that way, and it takes a long time to come to fruition.
So as time goes by, comics start to develop longer bits and routines. More stories, personality, more of themselves. But the more of yourself you give, the more it's gonna hurt to see someone else impersonate you and get away with it.
It's the same monster that these Me Too bitches was trying to tell you about.
People vote where they think there's power.
If you're a certain way with someone on a bigger hierarchy, you could probably get your foot into the door. And that's same with like any job.
So it creates this kind of culture where
People would kill their own grandmother to make it in stand-up, I think, allegedly.
They're never gonna know. But like, you know.
So the stealing thing starts to become a bigger problem. But it's tough to police until one of the more famous feuds creates a cultural shift. And that is Carlos Mencia versus Joe Rogan. So Mencia was allegedly one of the worst.
Carlos Mencia claims to be Mexican. His name isn't even really Carlos Mencia.
We're talking about long bits and word for word. So one night, Joe Rogan confronted him on stage.
He was way more popular than me, like especially as a comic, and the Comedy Store took his side.
So the usual. But this time, there was a change in technology and distribution. Not only did Joe Rogan have a cameraman film him, but the internet now existed. So Joe Rogan didn't need the backing of an agent or a club. He could upload it directly to his MySpace. And MySpace was like the social media of the time.
You're allowing one person, you're knowingly allowing them to profit off it, and no one's doing anything about it. So when one of us does something about it, then you're gonna punish that person.
So now there was this extra layer of accountability, which at first everyone underestimated. But over time, it went from Joe Rogan operating outside institutions to him eclipsing them. And Carlos Mencia went from being a joke to stand-ups in green rooms to being a joke to everyone.
Did you have time to come up with this classic joke? Well, you know, I was just kicking it with my homies and my brain. You know, my brain is always so full of ideas because I'm so funny and stuff.
My perception of it is, it's done. I will always have an asterisk by my name.
So now this new culture exists where no one wants to be accused of stealing for fear of public shaming. But part of the skill of stand-up, especially when you're starting out, is you have to be able to fail publicly and recalibrate. So if you did do it, can you admit it?
I once stole a joke, okay? I fucked up. I'm human. I'm defective. I'm sorry. Ooh. No, I once stole a joke and my agent dropped me when he found out. And I had 2 kids, very young kids, Daniel and Jack. They were like babies, and I found it very difficult to get work, and they went hungry. So basically, I stole a joke, and my children suffered.
Just smash them. No, I wouldn't. I don't know, actually. It's an interesting question.
But I'm glad it happened, because it woke me the fuck up. You just don't do it. I learned a lesson. It was a tough lesson, goddammit. But yeah, you don't do it. And also, what's the fucking point? No point. It's like you know, becoming an artist and kind of, you know, looking into somebody else's studio and just copying them. The fuck?
Okay, great. Except that artists famously do steal. And sure, everyone wants to be original, but also, you formulate your ideas by copying stuff you like. And this is nothing new.
I think everyone, I mean, even, you know, the greatest directors in the world say, I was inspired by this guy, I was inspired by that guy, and they use certain techniques that they were inspired by. Writers say, yeah, this is my mentor, this is my, you know, this is the guy I was inspired by. And then stand-ups go, no, it's all my stuff, I never nick anything from anybody, you know. No, of course everyone's inspired by other people, or they borrow things, or they reuse them, or they change them, or they or they just directly nick them and refuse to admit it.
So the problem isn't about being inspired by people. The problem is, where's the line for credit and compensation?
I'm going to pay some young guy who's been in the business 6 months, has a great premise. I've seen it all the time. Great premise, doesn't have the skills to make that shit funny. I've been there. There's times when I started where I go, man, I got this great bit, you know, in my mind, but it's just not going to execute because I'm not good enough to skillfully do it. And so why don't I just give this guy $100 who needs it? That's his first comedy dollar. Their royalty fee.
Yeah.
Something. That's what rappers do. They go, look, they don't just go, man, I was sitting in the back of the room and watched James Brown and said, this old fool motherfucker, I'm gonna make me a song. They gotta pay that nigga money, man, and his estate.
But that's, they don't have a choice in that.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite. Miles Davis said so much cool shit, but one of the things he said I always loved, he said, it took me years to learn how to play like myself. You know, he would watch other musicians and he would try to play like Dizzy or Bird or all the guys who were great. Tony Woods was my Dizzy and Bird if I was a Miles. I was trying to play like you. You were the first person I ever saw do it absolutely right.
So now everyone wants to be unique, but everyone also has that in common.
If I've ever been told I'm doing something like another comic, then usually I'm like, bin it.
If it even touches loosely on something someone else has, I don't want it.
I don't need to sound like them. They're a different person.
I want my material to be so authentically me that even if you heard another comic say that, it just wouldn't sound like their voice.
Except that that operates under the assumption that your ideas are original and doesn't take into account cryptomnesia, which is a psychological phenomenon where you think something's an idea, but it's in fact a memory. And humans are pretty prone to this. And humans are also pretty prone to parallel thinking.
I think there's a lot of people will arrive at similar things. Like, I think everyone's got a joke on dating apps. Mine's the best one though. It's the freshest take.
So the whole idea of jokes, I definitely think there's something to parallel thinking within comedy. That definitely exists, because I have thought of a joke, never told it, never talked about it with anyone, and I've gone to a show and I go, oh, fuck, they just told that fucking same joke.
Yeah, I do understand the premise that people will have the same concept, especially when you're like minorities or female or even sometimes men.
Somebody is going to have made that joke before. So they happen on TikTok, they're happening all over the place.
If you nick a gag off me, then you come up with something, haven't you?
If you're doing a joke that somebody else is also, like, has something similar, it's probably not a very good joke.
The one that really gets me, the one phrase that I always hear that makes me fucking die a little bit inside is like, hey, single people, can I get a round of applause or cheer or whatever? And they're like, woo! And then they go, hey, married people, and they go like, ah, and they're like, do you hear how sad they are? Shut the fuck up.
There are times as well where you do a gag where you might be in a terrible situation, like doing some terrible corporate event, and there's a joke. There's a joke that would fit for a minute, you know, and then you think, you do that gag, and then whoever I did that gag from, I would be damned if I don't ring them or email them, go, listen, I did a corporate event last night, I was in a real pickle and I nicked your gag.
Yeah.
I know guys who have done that, who have been in the middle of a riff and then said someone else's joke and then realized, oh my God, I just said someone else's joke.
I have seen comics before who've been like, oh, you know, I gigged, you know, I did this open mic or whatever in Australia or whatever, and this like newer whatever comic thought of this, but then I took it and ran with it, made it the whole idea. They're never gonna know. But like,
no, I mean, that is kind of the problem. Who owns a joke? Probably the comedian who wrote it, but not necessarily. Maybe if you take it and run with it and do something huge with it, maybe you own it now. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know. Can you punish it?
So the idea that people will come up with the same thing is inevitable, but it's never been to court before. But it almost went to court with Conan O'Brien and his writers when they were accused of joke theft. Alex Caseberg, the plaintiff, had tweeted a joke, which then got said on the Conan O'Brien show. Then, over the next month, this happened 4 more times. The case spent several years being litigated, with a detour to the Copyright Office over whether one of the jokes had enough originality to merit protection. They eventually settled out of court, and Conan O'Brien wrote an open letter saying how the internet has given everyone a platform, and now parallel thinking will be on display more than ever. And just as this was all wrapping up in the US, in the UK, a new legal battle was just beginning when a comedian, Darius Davies, recognized a routine similar to his own about smart fridges.
Okay, so this whole thing, I saw Jonathan Ross's comedy club was on TV and people were sharing it around. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, did he just what? He stole my whole bit, right? So I wrote him a letter. Basically, he went along the lines of, you saw me doing this routine here, just say sorry. Now you've done it on TV, you're gonna have to compensate me. It would have cost you £100, but now you can buy me a fridge, right? That was my solution. I then get a letter back from what we now know to be the Queen's lawyers, although I didn't know that at the time. Then they instantly sue us for defamation.
Oh dear. Yeah. The whole thing is hilarious.
So at this point, I decided to contact a bunch of lawyers to find out exactly what is legal and makes you eligible for copyright and defamation. But I quickly learned that lawyers charge you way more than comedians do just for talking, so I decided to go elsewhere for advice.
So my name's Ollie Firrell. I'm a stand-up comedian and a failed lawyer. But what was interesting is in the UK, as far as I can tell, there's never been a test case for copyright in jokes. In order to get copyright in a routine, there's got to be in a fixed form. Because stand-up routines, every time we perform, we're changing it. We're adding words, we're trying different expressions. And so we don't have kind of one performance that's replicated. We have many different versions of the same routine.
Unless you tape it.
Well, that's the thing. And every time you tape it, that you kind of get copyright in that performance.
But the whole legal system is designed to make money for lawyers. So you automatically have copyright of your taped routines, but you have to prove enough similarities and delivery to say that someone has infringed upon your copyright. Then you need a number of what you think that joke is worth, seeing as that material is now effectively burned. But this all takes time to negotiate, and time is money when you have lawyers involved. And if you accuse someone, they might counter-threaten you with a defamation lawsuit, saying that you're damaging their brand by accusing them of stealing from you. So, if this happens, the two of you come into a game of chicken of who's going to be the first to fold. But the longer the game goes, the more money the lawyers make, the more money you or one of you loses.
Not about the money, but if it were, we've both lost a lot of money and time. So now what's happened is, so part of the thing of them giving me this money, they would make me sign a non-disclosure agreement.
So if he signs the settlement, he gets the money for his joke, and the threat of defamation being taken to the High Court goes away. But he can never speak about it again.
A comic can't talk about something. Are you crazy? Your joy is the freedom you got, isn't it? You can say whatever you want, do whatever you want in a way. It's not not hurting anybody physically. So yeah, that's the joy, isn't it? Joy is the freedom. So to actually censor yourself, to sign off and say, I'm going to censor myself and make this lie the truth. It's an insanity.
And then I was in a meeting. I get an email. I look at it. It's from the Guardian, and it's like the Guardian media editor Jim Waterston, my good friend, and he was like, "Hi Darius, I see you're being sued for defamation in the High Court. What do you have to say about this?" I was like, "The fuck? I'm being sued for defamation in the High Court?" So I was under so much pressure. She says, "You've got to sign it. You've got to sign it. If you don't, he's going to sue you. You're going to get sued for bankruptcy. It's going to cost, even if you to answer the claim, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of pounds just to reply. It's going to cost you £10,000." So this is, I mean, I don't mind going bankrupt, but I don't want to go bankrupt over a rubbish joke. It's not worth that much to me.
So I could sign it, but what I'm thinking is I will agree to the settlement, everything, but I'm not going to have an NDA. I reserve the right to speak about, when I'm an old man and write my memoirs, the fridge incident.
So once again, it was settled out of court and Darius got paid for the routine. But once again, it would have been cheaper to solve amongst themselves than to ever get lawyers involved.
Does that mean that I think as long as the person who stole the joke, when they finally mea culpa and they say, "Listen, I'm sorry, I fucked up, I won't do it again," and then shakes hand or makes some kind of recompense to the person they stole the fucking joke from, then they can continue.
Stuart Lee, in his book, How I Escaped My Certain Fate, talks about his relationship with Ricky Gervais. He says when he met Ricky Gervais, Ricky was an enthusiastic promoter of stand-up nights and a smitten comedy fan. But years later, after a gig, Stuart Lee started to encounter accusations that he had copied Ricky Gervais. He says, the first time I was informed that I had copied Ricky Gervais was at the Amused Moose in Soho. A mother and her daughter, who had enjoyed my set but never seen me before, said that I was clearly influenced by Ricky Gervais. Then it happened again, 2 or 3 times. And then I started to wonder why Ricky was always praising me to the skies in interviews, and so I took up an offer of tickets to his new show at the Bloomsbury Theatre. I sat there dumbfounded. It wasn't that Ricky was the same as me. He wasn't. And I'm not saying that he had copied me. There wasn't a single line that exactly duplicated anything I'd ever done. But Ricky had the calmness and the way of offering up contentious ideas as if they meant nothing and were merely idle thoughts that I felt was a hallmark of my work. And which had always made it such a difficult fit for mainstream audiences at populist clubs. He described it as feeling like he had died, or he'd never been born. He said he felt jealousy. He'd made peace with not having mainstream success when he had felt like there wasn't scope for that with what he did. He then goes on to say, a few months later, I rang Ricky up and asked him if I could use one of his flattering interview quotes about me on a poster. He agreed, glad to help, and I think this single-handedly sold out the show Stand-Up Comedian on tour and in London and in Edinburgh. So maybe the best anyone can do is know that it's a long game, and ultimately we should want to work with and not against the people who we think are good. And bullying is going to happen in any industry, especially one that thrives on making fun of people. So you shouldn't let one person's treatment of you be a reflection on your ability to do the job you want. But if you mess with someone, you should probably try and fix it. Otherwise, you just better make sure you stay at the top forever. Oh wait, there is one more thing. Recently, Ricky Gervais had his work used verbatim by James Corden. So someone edited the videos together, then they tweeted it, and then people started piling on.
And I did a little sarcastic thing, great joke, right? But then he started getting grief, and I cancelled it. I deleted it because I started feeling sorry for him. Because let's be honest about this. He doesn't write his jokes. He's got a writing team, right? So either one of them saw me do it and forgot genuinely and gave it to James, or they stitched him up, right?
So basically, a toxic culture can find a way to survive no matter what the changes in technology. Which means the only way to really fix it is through the decisions of individuals within that culture. And this is a pretty important thing to remember. Because as I always like to say, we should never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups.
Should have been 1, 2, 3, but recently something has happened to me. Everything always came easily, but today I woke up and felt nothing. Could I be finally finding out that there's absolutely nothing worth shouting about? Faced with the choice of just losing my voice, I'd rather shut up and say nothing. On the outside, we have to stick together.